Misha here. And, well, the whole Sig M17, M18 thing has a lot of folks asking, what's an alternative? They're wanting a nice trigger and a striker-fired gun, but one with, better safety and just without all the controversy. One of the guns, especially if you're on a budget, I have recommended is this, the Beretta APX. This is an A1. You can still find the original generations. This is a full size. It's actually a really good value, especially with threaded barrel for what you get. And to be fair, this passed the MHS trials. And to be really fair, I'm quite a huge fan of Beretta. However, another gun that I recommend, and is more my personal choice, is the German Walther, or Walther if you prefer, PDP. They make this in such a range of sizes, styles. This one here is the LE edition with a 5-inch threaded barrel, full-size grip, quite a large magazine capacity, and last year in September, I brought to you a video talking about how this had been adopted as the Pistol 14, P14, by the German KSK and KSM, which makes me wonder if maybe it's being positioned to take over from the HK P8A1. After all, Walther made the pistols for the Bundeswehr, and before that, the Wehrmacht, for generations. So I thought I would talk about these. But this is just the latest iteration. Really, it's the Gen 4. Let's try the P99. Held open. Always reliable. With this being the Gen 1, the P99, there's a straight line between this gun from 1996 and this gun introduced in 2021. And with that, I also want to talk about in this video the latest final edition. We had the final edition in 2023, and then last year we got the final edition collector's series package for the P99. This is just a gun that I have a lot of history with. I picked up my first one in 99, 2000, and it just fit me well. So I'm going to give my personal accounts, because I think the PDP might be a great alternative if you are wanting to replace your Sig 320. It's even priced about the same. But I don't want to shortchange the APX, and while this video won't be on the Beretta today, we will cover it. Why not? Soon and shortly. I also want to comment that as of this Labor Day, I will have been posting videos for a full year without taking a vacation, a break. And a lot of that is through Patreon support and encouragement. And I'll keep going as long as I can. Eventually, I'm going to need a break, but look at the output over the last year. I try to bring new stuff to you when I can. I know a lot of times it's the same old, but that's kind of the gun market we live in, and I'm personally funded. I buy this stuff. I'm not getting sponsored. I don't really get T&E guns. And so I do it because I love making videos. I love interacting with you guys. If you'd like to help support, liking, sharing, subscribing, that goes a huge way. Commenting helps a lot in the algorithm. And you can always super thanks, or you can do Patreon if you really want to help support us. With that, let's just dive on in. EP. Side by side here at the table, maybe you can kind of get a better idea of the color. And also different import marks. Originally, Inner Arms brought these over for a couple of years, but same basic style of sights. large decocker that I really like, and of course interchangeable back straps. Well, it started to kind of sprinkle, so I moved inside. And we will talk about the final edition and the final edition collector series. But first, here's my old-fashioned Generation 1. This is not a collector's piece for me. I've always had as a shooter. And this is not actually the first one I bought. That was in 40 Smith & Wesson back around 2000-ish. This one here is the military version. I'm in quotes with the OD frame. And I've had it a number of years now. But there was an era where I kind of got away from 40 Smith & Wesson. The case is fine. It's plastic. It comes with 2 mags. Back straps. It does have a cleaning rod, which is kind of funny. You don't see that a lot in more modern guns. Perfectly good. So what sets the P99 apart from just, all the other polymer framed guns? Well, first off, when it was introduced, there weren't that many polymer framed guns. And secondly, this was designed for military police duty use and to revitalize the Karl Walther brand name. After World War II, Fritz Walther would go to West Germany, and there was a whole thing with partnering with Herein. I've covered in other videos. The P38 is updated, becoming the P1 of the Bundeswehr, and then the police get the P4 and the P5. And it's still a family-owned company at this point. And their last kind of real gas was the P88, P88 Compact, and P5 Compact. The P88 is a fantastic gun for what it was. It was also very expensive, and kind of them transitioning away from the classic P38 locking wedge system, going to the Browning style like the P99. But it was awfully expensive, very accurate, but maybe not as durable as it could have been. And by the late 80s, Walther was bankrupt. And so the family would basically lose control of the company because of that. But in would sweep Umrex, the airsoft company, who was also German-owned, and they were connected to like GSG and all that. They would buy the Walther company, and then they would need a product. So in 1993, they were kind of brainstorming about where to go with it. And in 94, development began on this gun, and by 1996, it was finished as the P99, the successor to the P88. Another mag to the P99. As I said, at this era, Glock is in its Generation 2 phase. It's not quite Generation 3 yet. There aren't that many polymer-framed guns on the market. And Horst Wesp, who did work on the Glock, was lead designer on the P99, and it shows because there's lessons learned there and improvements made. But also that just kind of well-built construction. Now, keep in mind, too, in 1994, the U.S. would pass the federal assault weapons ban, which limited rifles quite a bit, but with pistols, its main deal was the magazine capacity. These are the original 16-shot mags, smooth-sided, kind of a blued body. They're actually very much derived from the P88 mags, but with a different base plate, a few other little changes. But at the era and time, they were only able to ship these with 10. That's why me and many other people went for this 40 Smith & Wesson round when these came into the country. If you're going to have 10 rounds, might as well have bigger bullets. And the 90s were the era of the 40 Smith & Wesson. So I just wanted to explain that's why I originally purchased one of these, lightly used, but practically new, in 40 Smith & Wesson, because you couldn't really find the 16-shot 9mm mags legally because they were all made after September 94. So that was one reason. But what sets this apart? And how does it get us to the PDP? And, you know, how does it actually answer some of the questions that are going with the 320 series today? Because it does. It is a pretty traditional, modified, linkless Browning tilting barrel system, much like a Glock. So nothing really new there. One of the innovations that first came out with the P99, though, interchangeable back straps. Yeah, no other production pistol before this had them. And it shipped with a total of 3, large, medium, and small. And what I like about these is they actually plug into the grip. They're not a slip over like Glock would later do. Now, you do have to drive out a roll pin, which actually doubles as your lanyard connection point, so double duty there. But they're very secure and they're very flush into the frame of the gun. They're also kind of a soft, rubbery material, and, well, my pistol is 25 years old, and they're not degrading, so they were made well. But it gives not just a nice palm swell, but a little bit of recoil buffer. Now, they got an Olympic pistol designer and shooter to come in from Italy and make this grip, and it shows. Look, I grew up with the Glock, Generation 1, Generation 2, and my brother had one issued as a police officer. Fine. But the first time when I was at a store, I called and they said they had a used unfired P99 in. Turns out the store was really close to my house, and I just turned 21. So went there, and when he set it in my hands, I knew right away I was going to be walking out of the store with it. Different hands, it matters. But the way the grip is more vertical, but still got some curve to it, the way it does have finger grooves, but they're not very aggressive. The sides, the kind of cutout for the thumbs, everything about it fits my hand so well. And then the slide, it's not as blocky as a Glock. It's, you know, chamfered in kind of half of an octagon. I just really liked it. And this was right when the Generation 3 Glocks came out. Because these pistols, like I said, designing was finished in 96. The earliest prototypes over in Unified Germany were that year. The first full year of production was 1997. And at first they had this one style of trigger system. I think this is super innovative and super cool. When at rest, when it's uncocked, you have a double action only. Long pull, but it's not super heavy. But when you rack it, the trigger stays in the forward position, but it's a light pull back to kind of a single action, and then it's a pretty short pull, much lighter, and then subsequent resets not very far forward, let off like that. Even though it's a striker system, by the way, there is a cocked indicator back here so you can visually see where you're at to kind of anticipate the trigger. It gives the double action, emulation, and single action. I think that is really, really great. And if that's not enough, you have a decocker, which resets it to double action only. And that decocker serves a secondary purpose. One complaint you really heard back in the 90s as the Glock was really getting around was you had to pull the trigger to disassemble it. This gets around that. Now, it disassembles, I think, a little better than a Glock. It has a lever that pulls down right here. It's double-sided. Now, you do have to release the striker, but you can just use your decocker. So you don't actually have to pull the trigger. We have a very standard frame, metal rails, very standard slide. It does have a captive spring assembly and standard barrel, like I said. And these were originally tinifer treated with adjustable 3-dot sights, a system that Walther would continue for a very long time. We do have standard internal safeties, all that here. The first importers into America in 1997, it was Interarms. They had been doing Walthers for a good bit of time, but their star was finally kind of setting. And so by 2000, Smith & Wesson became the new importer for the Walther line, including the P99 in America. And just to show you the anti-stress trigger decocker. Those decocked midway. And one neat thing, if you have it on double mode, just a little pull and you're back to anti-stress single action mode. And I do indeed not feel stressed. And they would remain the importer, servicer, marketer till about 2012. Again, we're in single action mode. We can easily do that. Not a bevel magwell, but back then didn't really have them. It is the German style paddle release, ambidextrous. Note that the trigger doesn't have a dingus on it. The earliest versions did have a split trigger, i.e. like a Glock, but very soon, after just the first year or so, they would go to this kind of modified system. And like I said, I think this addresses some of the things that the 320 tries. It doesn't have a dingus either. Because some people, not myself personally, but some people find the dingus either distracting or even painful. But what Walther did, there's actually still a two-piece trigger here. Under the main trigger, there's another piece. And that does act in the same way, where unless you're actually pressing the trigger all the way, it still provides that degree of safety. And that probably explains why there haven't really been issues with these over the years. Because, well, I'm not going to say the P99 was the most successful police pistol of all time. Several dozen police departments inside Germany, outside Germany, adopted these. They saw service in Canada. Finland adopted it as the PIST 2003 for their border guards. Rather famously, Radom in Poland got licensed production rights by 2008. It was successful. And of course, in 1997, right as it was coming on the market, it appeared in James Bond, Tomorrow Never Dies, which is probably the first place myself and you ever saw this. Excellent marketing. You know, some other little features. We do have a single-sided slide release. And we have a rail under the barrel, but it is a proprietary rail. But for 1997, that's kind of the norm. HK does the same thing. This is before pick rails are a standard feature. You know, handguns are evolving quite rapidly. I should also point out that these were significantly faster and cheaper to produce than like the P88 and more traditional guns, which allowed Walther to drop the price, still have good quality, and just turn these out faster. On top of that, in Germany, they would do them in 9x19. They would also do them in 9x21 for nations like Italy, where they didn't want military calibers. Smith & Wesson would work with Walther for the P99 40 cals. Some of your P99 40 cals had German slides and barrels. Some, especially when they're trying to meet demand, would actually have their slides and barrels made in the U.S. by Smith & Wesson. It's very easy to tell a 9mm versus a 40 slide because the 9mm has this kind of chamfer, this cutout scalloped area. The 40 doesn't, for extra mass. They're also just a little bit longer, where the slide sticks out and the barrel sticks out from the frame, just a smidgen. This is a 4-inch barrel. It's just over 100 millimeters in the barrel. The 40 cal is about a 4.2-inch barrel, although the frames are basically the same. And the 40 cal weighs a little more, about 23 ounces versus 22 unloaded for the 9mm version. Overall length is about 7.1 inches for the 9mm, whereas the 40 is about 7.25, 7.3. Just a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier. And that also gets us to the SW99, which Smith would make with Walther frames, but patently Smith uppers for at least 5-6 years in the early 2000s. And they would do a 45 ACP version in the SW99 line that, of course, Walther never made over there. But that's the so-called Generation 1. This is the so-called Military Edition, and it's quite similar to the Final Edition. But first, we also need to talk about Generation 2, which appeared in 2004. Walther had several versions and editions of this, even early on, including the military OD green frame. It's not really military, but it's a pretty popular model, myself included, that they've done on and off. They did a 007 and MI6 edition, and they did several variations for police trials and whatnot. But as I said earlier, time's moving on quite quickly. So in 2004, they introduced the Generation 2. To begin with, they actually slightly changed the case, going from the square top to kind of a rounded top. Not a very big difference, but worth talking about. And I don't personally own a Generation 2 full-size, but I do own a Generation 2 P99 compact, which there really wasn't a Generation 1 P99 compact. It came out in 2004 with the Generation 2 here. Pretty much the same accessory set as before. We still have the cleaning rod, still have back straps, only the compact just comes with two, kind of a small and a large. And it comes with two mags, although there is a small difference in them. What have you. Let's just talk about the general differences between Gen 1 and Gen 2. So pretend like this is a full size. First off, the slide serrations change from these very fine ones to larger ones here. They also get rid of the so-called ski hump under the trigger on the guard. For some reason that bothered a lot of people. It never has bothered me, but I get it. The idea was it would give that kind of constant there, but I could see how it could pinch you. And they would go to a new generation of magazine. These hold 16 rounds. They would actually go to ribbed-sided versions that held 15 for just a little bit better reliability there. But probably one of the biggest differences, we finally have a true 1913 Picatinny compatible rail. Only one notch, but it's enough. Now you might be wondering why I didn't mention the mag release. This is longer, more extended than this. That's because that it didn't initially appear with the Gen 2, but it would come very shortly thereafter by 2005. And this is definitely something I do like. I don't have a problem with the Gen 1, but it is relatively small. And something else they offered is kind of an option with the Gen 2, the slide stop. Now, this is only on the left side for Gen 1. Gen 2 as an option, you could get a right-sided one and even an extended right-sided one, although it wasn't a standard feature. We would have to actually wait till what was effectively Gen 3 for that, but it became, you know, a feature there. Another thing, they rounded the front of the trigger guard a bit. Here. So with that, since it is based on the Gen 2, let's peek back over at the P99 Final Edition. I don't have one out here with me at the cabin. By the way, I opened the door so maybe you can hear the nice pleasant rain. It's really cooling off. But I did record some back at the shop, the house, before leaving. So let's go to Misha from about a week ago.
Clear.
What'd you think?
I like it.
Yeah.
It feels good.
Now,
I even like the trigger.
yeah, no, that's what I was saying. They don't really do the anti-stress trigger like that anymore. They have like that PDP trigger. Yeah, that's just what they have.
Yeah,
now.
it feels good.
Yeah. Now they were underappreciated guns in their day. In 2023, at the beginning of the year, Walther announced that they were finally ramping down production of the P99. They'd kind of already scaled it back in 2021, but they announced they're finally just getting them. Whereas other versions like the PDP, which Jay and I have done a lot of on this channel over the years, were got to be pretty popular in America. The P99 series really remained popular in Europe, so they kept it around. In the final edition came with, well, some special accoutrement and really special packaging and, you know, a coin. The Walther P99 Final Edition Collector's Series Set, whatever, comes in what I think of as a hat box. It's a two-piece cardboard box. It's fine. Pretty good representation. Inside that, you have a Pelican Vault style case. I believe it's in green, but you know me and colors. Either way, quite a nice case. With the pistol inside. It does come wrapped in plastic. I've just started taking it out and just have a chamber flag. One spare mag and one in the gun. Below it on the second level is where the manual typically goes and the back straps. It comes with a challenge coin or whatever. And it is certainly a challenge. I had to really work it out of this little pocket it's in. Getting it in? Easy. Yeah, getting it out. But it's not going anywhere. I'll give them credit for that. Now you might be thinking, of course, that's what the original P99 Final Edition came with. And you were absolutely right. So what's different about the collector's set? Then last year, 2024, they had the P99 Final Edition Collector's Series package, kit, set, what have you, that was the same gun, same package, but with, you know, a couple of extras, a couple of add-ons. And that's why I thought we would do this video, because there is a bit of confusion, and rightfully so. You do get a holster. It's nothing special. But again, I do believe it is green. And it does fit the pistol well. More interesting though, you get this little belt pouch. And inside it, you get this knife. Marked Walther. And the blade is marked P99. Also marked made in China, but it has one kind of really cool feature, in my opinion, that really makes it mesh well with this here pistol. The other thing that the collector's edition comes with is this. It comes in quite a nice little belt pouch. Wrapped up here, we have a knife. even though it is marked made in China. I mean, at least they're being honest about it, I'll be fair. It is also marked P99. That's pretty neat. But I was kind of wondering why there are 2 extra back straps in here for the pistol. Because in the box, you know, we already have some. Then I realized they're not for the pistol. They're actually interchangeable back straps for the knife because they're replicating the grip of the pistol. I don't know why, but I think that is super cool. And again, since this series doesn't really cost more money, let's see how I fold this here. You can tell I haven't spent much time with it. It's always just nice to get a little extra for essentially nothing. But the interchangeable back straps on the knife kind of just made it for me. What about you? Before we kind of go deeper there, let's go back to the trigger systems. The simulated double single action in striker form with large decocker was the original introduction. But it would not be long before they would introduce the P99 which had just a double action only, no decocker. Those were for police departments that wanted it for safety. And they would introduce the P99 QA, which was essentially a Glock style trigger, meaning a little bit shorter pull, kind of an in-between pull between DA only and not, but a bit of a heavier but constant weight. And it had a small decocker, really intended for disassembly. But I do like that you could put one in the pipe, pretend the mag is loaded, and then gun is safe. Yeah, quarter throw, and it's ready to go. Yeah, known as the P99 QA. Now, when they went to the Generation 2, 2004, they renamed things. This is when this trigger system became the P99 AS. The P99 P99O became the P99 DAO, makes sense. And the P99 QA kept its name. So, those were the 3 main systems. Yeah, the names changed a bit, but the actual mechanics didn't. It was just for better clarification. With that said, let's talk about the difference in the full size and the compact, which is a little confusing because then if you're a Glock person, this is more equivalent to the Glock 19, and this is absolutely based on the Glock 26. Now time for the compact with the flush fit mag. Can't say fairer than that. Mostly going to be talking about the 9mm versions here. This has a 4-inch barrel, like I said, which actually was a little problematic in Canada. An overall length of just about 7.1 inches, and it's about 5.3 inches tall with the standard 16-shot mag. And weight for 9mm unloaded, it's about 22 ounces. So, as you can see, pretty commensurate, maybe just a hair larger than the Glock 19, but part of that is the more vertical grip. For our compact here, we have a 3.5-inch barrel, giving us an overall length of about 6.6 inches. And our height with the standard mag, which is a 10-shot and 9, for what it's worth, it's an 8-shot and 40, of about 4.3 inches, so it's about an inch shorter. And we weigh roughly 19, 20 ounces. It's actually a little hard to pin it down. It's a little bit lighter, but not significantly. And as I said earlier, it comes with 2 mags, but there's a slight difference here. taking inspiration from the original PP and PPK, we get the same mag body, the same tube, but with a finger extension or a flush fit base plate. And yeah, it does help. Of course, it does make it about half an inch longer in the front there. Now let's do the finger rest mag. It has the same capacity, just a little extra place for your pinky. You got your decocker here. Deactivates it, but you can just charge it a bit. You're good to go. Small as it is, it's a lot of fun. Another fun fact about the P99 compact mags, like I said, this came out in 2004. You know what else happened in 2004? The U.S. federal assault weapons ban sunset, meaning later versions could come with these mags. Although these are Gen 1 mags, and Gen 2 are a little different. Very easy way to tell, again, ribs on the sides. But I love Walther's waste not, want not. Even though this is a Generation 2, gun in the compact, this shortened tube that holds 10 rounds was the original tube that shipped with this style of gun. It just had an extended base plate that came down and had a little polymer thing there. So they took the tooling for the Gen 1 10-round mags, which really would not be useful for two different reasons, and that's what they based the compact mag on. And it makes sense, because the Generation 2 dimple-sided mag did lose one round and would have done so in the compact, but they wanted to have the 10+1 capacity. And it was a tried and tested mag, and they had them, so I love the fact that they just kind of retooled them for that purpose. It was with the sunset of the assault weapons ban around this era that I did kind of go away from .40 Smith & Wesson like a lot of people and replaced my existing gun with this one here. And then got a compact to go with it. Now, in a previous video sometime back, someone commented that it was kind of cool that I had the QA in the compact. I never really thought about it because I actually picked this one up around 2010 because CDNN had these and the full size on a really good blowout deal. They were brand new guns. They were just kind of new old stock, overstock, whatever. That's what CDNN does. For $3.99 retail, you could get the full size, you could get the compact in 9. They probably had .40 Smith & Wesson too, but I didn't really pay attention. And that's because the QA was really meant for police, law enforcement, maybe government agencies. It was the P99 SA here, and like the final edition, that really was the attention getter because of its dynamic system. And speaking of, let's revisit the P99 AS Final Edition Collector's Series and look at the extras that it ships with. Let's try it with some Cellar and Bellet. It's got some heat behind that ammo, but this gun is still very comfortable despite it. I know we're losing daylight, but hey, this new hammer is supposed to be a little better in dim. Yeah, here's our final edition, final collector's series edition. Finally, for real, we mean it this time. And look, here's the holster it comes with. It's basically free, so take it for what you will. I think one cool thing is it almost perfectly, at least according to Jay, matches the color or the frame. You can let me know what you think. To fold, you just press in here and fold up. To flip out, you just pull out. It's not a fancy knife. It's not a high-end, several $100 knife, but it's kind of cool to have something to go with our P99. And it looks useful enough. But if anyone's actually tried using these for real-world tests, let me know how well they hold up. The little belt pouch, I think, is neat. But again, the holster, I mean, I guess it works. It is sufficient. It's at least made for the P99. That's about all I can say about it. Best part, though, Walther didn't raise the price when they started including the knife and the holster. That's why I don't really kind of mind the holster being a little cheesy. You get everything else and a little extra. I wonder, this is just personal speculation, that if they, from the get-go, intended to sell it as a kit, but maybe the holster and knife, because obviously made in China is on there, are subcontracted out. I wonder if they just weren't available yet in 2023, so they just went on and released them. Or maybe the final edition wasn't selling well enough and they thought, let's throw in some bonus. Either way, in 2024, and that gun is dated CE by the German date code system, which would be 2024. It's pretty cool they come with it. And I really have no complaints. So yeah, no notes. And I really like the P99, as you've seen over the years. It's a great gun. It's a reliable gun. But it is a dated gun. You know, the original Gen 1, much like the Glock Generation 2, great for its day and time. When they did the Gen 2 update, it really did bring it into the modern era, and that worked for a while. But in 2011, effectively, the Gen 3 came out. Known in America as the PPQ, in Europe it was kind of an evolution that began with the P99 RAD, the Radom, the Polish version, and the P99 Q, the police version, which kind of took the QA trigger, but gave it the nicer pull and shorter reset of the single action from the original. They also checkered the grip a little differently, more of an octopus look, and that one is avoid. We've done plenty of videos. I don't actually have my PPQ out at the cabin with me this go round, but the PDP is effectively the Generation 4. So that would come out in 2011, and then in 2012, the Smith & Wesson Walther Umrix deal would, come apart, and it's over. And so this is when Walther USA appears by 2013, right here in Arkansas, actually not even an hour away from where I'm at right now. And this is Umrix pretty much just doing their own importation and marketing, and I think that was wise, because Smith & Wesson had too many other product lines, and they just weren't as interested in the Walthers as they could have been. So that with Umrix, Walther USA taking over, you start to see the PPQ taking much more penetration into the market. And then you get the M2, which went to the Browning style release. And then in 2021, the PDP came out. Up to this point, the PPQ was kind of the American, and the P99 was still kind of the European. With this, they wanted to unify the series and modernize it. And I think they did that very successfully. And that's why I've been telling people, if you're no longer trusting your SIG, you might give this a go. See how this guy does. Held open. Did quite good. Does come unscrewed sometimes. My personal PDP is the LE edition. It comes in this little bit enlarged case. Much nicer latches than what they had on the P99. And it comes with a total of 3 mags instead of 2. You still get 2 back straps. And you get a mag loading tool, which started coming with the PDP, but they did actually take away the polymer cleaning rod, so oh dear. I don't think it's a problem, actually. Now this started off as the 4.5-inch version, but I picked up a 5-inch threaded barrel from Walther, so I could run it suppressed. All right, one more mag. It's pretty easy to hit that when you got chambered round or empty. A lot of fun. I do miss the decocker though, which it does very well. In fact, I was using my PPQ First Edition as the host for the Osprey suppressor, but it's kind of moving over to this more and more as time goes on. The PPQ introduced the split trigger again like a Glock. It also standardized the extended and ambidextrous slide releases, which I said earlier were optional on the P99 Gen 2. The grips are updated. They're still removable back straps. The PDP kept the same 15-shot capacity as the P99, but with the PDP, what was the full-size frame became the compact frame, and then they introduced a new extended frame here with an 18-shot mag. And then you can get it in barrel lengths, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5 inches. There's even a 5-inch extended slide version with multiple slots. You do get a red dot, a plate mounting system on top. They finally kind of moved away from the Walther style sights to more Glock compatible. The other things you really lost with the PPQ and then PDP, no more decocker, which I do kind of miss. And the cocked indicator typically isn't featured, although I have seen some special run PPQs for contracts that did retain them. And it's just a more, modernized gun. Of course, you have front serrations for the slide now. And a gun very similar to this was adopted by the German military, at least special forces, as the P14. And P14K is the more compact version. And Browning release, as I've said before, I do miss the European style mag release, but in America at least, people like the Browning style. In all honesty though, it's the same gun. It's just gone through nearly 30 years of evolution, and that's not a bad thing, kind of like Glock does as well. And it's been a success for Walther. The PDP especially seems to have finally made some inroads for them. And I think it does what people really wanted from the Sig. What they wanted here was a really nice trigger and a striker gun, and it does have this. They also wanted a modern optic mounting system, higher capacity, ambidextrous. Of course, this one does have a safety. This has equally nice trigger. It does have the dingus on here, which I'm going to be honest, you need something. Yeah, the P99 doesn't have the dingus, but it does have a 2-piece trigger system that effectively provides the same safety lever. On top of that, it has a decocker, which on this one puts you in double action mode, which is, you're not going to pull that trigger accidentally. And on this one, the decocker just, deactivates the gun, which, okay, for a defense gun, if you're in the military police, may not be ideal for using it there, but for a home defense gun, it's a very short throw to charge it, so, hey. And of course, with the PPQ and PDP, you have the dingus on the trigger for safety. Whereas on the Sig, no decocker, no dingus, meaning your only safety is here. And that's only on some guns. So to me, without the safety, if you have one of the SIGs without it, that's scary. And what I've learned in more recent times, after doing videos, is apparently, at least in the Air Force, they're trained to carry these with one in the chamber, a loaded magazine, and then for some reason, safety off, meaning there's very little between you, that trigger, and firing that bullet. That really disturbs me. And I don't know why the Air Force... Well, I actually do have a very good idea why the Air Force does it that way, because of legacy from the M15 and M9. I think they need to change that policy right away. But we're not really here about the Sig. We're about the Walthers and the, of course, final edition, because I think it's cool and a really good value for what it is. Definitely going with the Pinky Rest mag. For a Glock style-ish trigger, it's not bad. I can definitely see for like police use where it'd come in handy. One way or the other, I've owned one of these for 25 years. And I've never had concern. I think a lot of the innovations here were really good. The ergonomics, even the trigger on this first, version, for that era, was an excellent striker fired trigger. Even today isn't bad. With the Generation 2, they took what was there and improved it and gave more options. And this is about the era 2005 to 2008 when you see a good number of police and even military going with these and the new trigger systems. And then it just gets better, and Walther's keeping up with modernity with the PPQ and PDP. They're not just leaping ahead, but they're definitely keeping up. And what I really like, this is a German-made gun. This is made in Ulm, Germany. Back in 2007, I actually visited the factory. I happened to be in that neck of the woods, and why not? That was right when the PPS was coming out. I don't know. Walthers are understated to me. Everyone thinks of Glocks. Sometimes people think of HK. They used to think of Sig. Walther's just been quietly making really good Germanic guns, and the price is very competitive, let's say. Not the cheapest. I mean, these aren't the Turkish clones. Although I must admit, the Turkish clones of the P99 have really kind of got the anti-stress trigger system a more popular thing in America, so cool on them. And they're not a bad option either. But you get a certain level of refinement with the German guns that you might not with a copy or clone. Your mileage may vary. Same thing goes with the SW99s. There was a bunch of back and forth when they hit the market. But the real German-made ones, it's hard to knock. And again, these have all the modern bells and whistles. They're very accurate. They work well suppressed. And it all began with the P99 here. And I just wanted to feature the collector's set final edition because questions kind of came up. And essentially doing a couple of anniversary videos of my own for having made videos for a straight year. And pretty much my comeback video was last Labor Day. So, September of 2024. After getting the well dug out here and everything, that's when kind of full habitation began out here that I could stay for more than a couple of days. I did start coming out in April of last year, but couldn't really stay more than 3 or 4 days without, running water and a shower and a crapper. Not to mention, Miss Peanut couldn't join me. You were oddly camera shy today. Yes. Ready to have dinner? That's my foot. Yeah. So if nothing else, it's her 1-year anniversary as well. Let me know what you think. Do you own one of the Generation 1 made between 97 and 2004? Do you own a Gen 2 made really from 2004 up until 2024? Different variations and everything. Or maybe you own a PPQ or a PDP. And if so, if you own a PDP, do you agree with me that it's a acceptable alternative to the Sig? I mean, I think it really does address a lot of the safety and handling issues, be it design or user induced, that this gun has. And as I said at the beginning of the video, we will also look at the Beretta APX. Sorry this had to move indoors, but I'm not sorry for having rain, because it is joyous. It was getting very dusty and dry out here, and it's also cooled it off. So, looking to be a good Labor Day weekend. You got any plans? As I record this, we're a couple of days out. And I think I'll probably be pretty low-key with it, but you never know. Maybe have a few company come over. But I just really wanted to talk about one of my favorite guns, because if not exactly this exact physical gun, one just like it, although it was in black and 40 Smith & Wesson, was pretty much my first modern polymer gun. Before that, I owned Makarovs and some older Walthers like PP and PPK. But while this wasn't first to market, after the Glock and the HK USP, it was one of the first truly high quality, duty grade, service grade, striker fired 9mm available. And it often gets overlooked in history. And that's why I always like doing videos on it. Again, a year ago, I did a video on this exclusively, talking about the P14, so check that out if you haven't. And it'll be interesting to see if this goes further in Bundeswehrservice. And yeah, for a time, people didn't want the P99 QAs, and so picked this up quite affordably at CDNN, but shoot, that was 15 years ago. Time flies, guys. It does fit well in the hand, I'm not gonna lie. Very well balanced, as you can see. It's balancing right on my trigger finger there with very little coercion. So, yeah. Appreciate you hanging out today. Hope everyone's doing well. We're good over here. If you could help support the channel, again, been working all year at it for you guys, because of you guys, and to you guys. Like, share, subscribe, comment, definitely. Super thanks if you want to do a one-time thing on YouTube, or Patreon if you'd like to donate $1 or $2 or more a month. It all kind of goes back into making videos. With that, this is Misha. Also on behalf of Peanut, well, both. Catch you very soon, hopefully with fall weather next time.